Okay, well, hello everybody, and welcome to our fourth class in the patient-led knowledge is empowerment, public policy education and action program. So today's lesson, value assessments, and we put a 101 on there because we're going to try to keep this very simple and very basic. It is an extremely complex topic, but so important for patients and care partners to understand, especially because you are going to have the opportunity to be more and more invited into these assessments on your treatments, right? So that's important. And if you don't know what they are, it'd be really hard to get involved. So that's what we're going to talk about today. My name is Tiffany Westrich-Robertson. I am the CEO of AiArthritis. I am also a person living with the diseases. My diagnosis is axial spondyloarthritis, the non-radiographic kind, to be more precise, because we're all about precision medicine. So I like to do the subgroup, and that'll tie right into also some of the stuff we're going to talk about today. And just fun fact, I was a college teacher for a decade. So I'm kind of having fun teaching again. And I am not alone. I have here my discussion leader, also a patient, Michael. Say hi, Michael. Tell everyone a little about you.
I'm Michael Guadalupe. I'm one of the volunteer and administrative assistants. So if you ever want to volunteer, you'll hear from myself or Deanne right away. Deanne's in the chat as well. I have psoriatic arthritis. I have had that for about 15 years now, and have a lot of experience in that as well. And like Tiffany, I too actually looking at getting my certification for teaching in the state of Texas. Yay. And so I'm a kind of teacher maybe. So yeah, that's about it. That's about it about me.
Discussion leader.
Yes, and in discussion leader. So now and Kat, if you can tell us about yourself.
Wonderful. Thanks, Michael. And I didn't know that maybe you're located in Texas. I grew up in Texas, so we should connect about that offline. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. My name is Cat Koola Fischer, and I work at the Institute for Clinical and Economic Review, otherwise known as ICER. I serve as ICER's Director of Patient Engagement. So I've been with ICER for almost 5 years now. I started off helping lead our independent drug reviews and now do patient engagement full-time as of the last 2 years. And so my priority is ensuring that every patient community is identified, invited, and that their voice is incorporated throughout all of our value assessments. So I'll be sure to share more about ICER during my presentation, but thank you again, Tiffany and Michael, for having me.
Absolutely. And Kat told me that she recently got married, and I forgot to add the married name. I'm so sorry. I'm a hyphenated too, so I should have been right on that.
No,
but
no worries at all.
I have a feeling I have a feeling like maybe towards the end, if we have your name in there as a thank you, it might magically appear. I don't know. We'll see. If we have time to edit it. If not, we'll make sure in the notes to add that in there. Okay, so yes, I see the chat is starting, and we do encourage everyone to say hello. This is class, and it is a virtual class. So in all of the classes I've ever taught, I really enjoy them being interactive. I think it's the best way to learn. But of course, you can always sit back too and take this all in. We said it is a complex project, but something we all have to start talking about as we think about value and access to treatments that are important to us. So I'll move forward here. I just want to thank our sponsors of the Knowledge is Empowerment program and about participation. So as we said, please use the chat. You can watch, you can listen, you can learn, however you feel more comfortable learning. There are no dumb questions. I want to make that really clear. So please, if you have any questions, you do not have to feel embarrassed, like I should know this. We don't expect you to know anything about these topics. So this is a safe environment and a safe space for you to ask those questions. I did add us, if you've been in our classes before, you're going to see one little addition to the chat. I want to make sure if you're on and you are not a patient or a care partner involved, please refrain from using the chat. We know that this is a very complex, but sometimes controversial topic. And so we want to make sure that we're keeping this for patients to learn, for care partners to learn. And just so you know, this is a bigger than just today thing. So we'll talk a little bit more towards the end on how you can get more involved in this and other classes. Last but not last but not least, we have a chat in the chat. If I don't know if Michael will be able to copy and paste it right this second, but he will when he's able to have an opportunity to do so, or else there's a QR code here that links right to our glossary. Sometimes we say words and we try to make sure that they're very understandable in real time. But if we miss that, you can always look it up in real time if you have your glossary as well, or you can look it up later. So there we go. There is also closed caption available if you need that. All right, here is our agenda for today. We are going to start off. I'm going to talk a little bit about what a value assessment from a patient perspective, from the patient voice, and a little bit about specifically how it may impact rheumatology patients, which is why you should care. And then we're going to turn it over to Kat. And then after that, we're going to actually have a class discussion. So that'll be, we'll turn off the slides. We'll just chat with our cameras on and with you in the chat. And then we'll just tell you a little bit more about why your involvement matters and how you can get involved. So let's get rolling here. All right. So in breaking down value assessments, I just wanted to start with the words, right? Because value, what is value? Does it mean to you improved health, living longer? I know with me, oh my gosh, I don't know how many comorbidities I have now, but it seems like they keep growing the longer I have these diseases. And it's not uncommon. I know the longer we have these, if we're not on treatments that are working well for us, that we can develop more and more. And that's not uncommon. But what is value to you? So we thought we'd start off with the chat too, just thinking about your rheumatic disease and managing it. What do you feel is valuable? Value in treatments. So for me, my treatment is valuable because before I was on treatments, when I had my onset, oh my gosh, I was sleeping 16 hours a day. I had brain fog and a fever, and I was just miserable. And then I finally got on treatments, and it's been a trial and error process, but I'm finally on one that works. And here I am feeling good. And so that's valuable to me, being on a treatment that works. So when we think about the value assessments, and as we'll keep talking about the importance of you sharing these kinds of stories, we want you to just start by thinking about what's valuable to you. That's kind of step one here. We asked some questions like, what is your story? I mean, don't feel like you have to type it out here, but just some things to think about. If you want to share, please share your story, share anything you like in the chat. There are people I know. I saw Deb on here. She's gone through all of the treatment. She's going around second again. Some of us have existing damages. Some of us don't. Some people are older, so we have multi-morbidity, which could mean it's not even related to your disease at all. Like maybe you have another condition like diabetes, or you just have something age-related that also is factoring into your health. So all of these things that we think about, but we all might have the same diagnosis. And that's just important to understand as we talk about this. And again, why your contribution and your voice is so important, so people can understand the full spectrum of lived experience. I have a little circle here in the middle, and that's showing you, like that little circle. Now it looks like an egg, but the little circle in the middle, that's you out of all of these people. But the thing that we really want to take away today, after I talk, after Kat talked, after we all talk, is that even though there might not be a one-size-fits-all treatment, and there are subgroups around us, and precision medicine is on the horizon, we are addressing these things as we advance the health technology assessment, our value assessment processes. And if more and more people talk, then it's not just one anymore. Then it creates subgroups. And once we have subgroups, then we have more data. And once we have more data, we have more information that we can put into these health technology assessments or value assessments so that we can make a bigger difference. So saying that, I'm going to just say in my words what a value assessment is. I know this still, I tried to make this really generic, but it's hard. So I'm wondering if Kat will do a better job on it. We'll see. Also, I have a picture of myself up here in this video, but I'm not actually going to click on it. If you've been in any of our classes in the past, we will often click and show you an excerpt because we want you to see other tools that look like this that are available in part of our classroom. We have many things available, this being one of them. And we have this whole library of all of these different topics that we have over 30 videos so far of all of these with patients explaining to you what all of these things mean. So since I'm the one that was explaining value assessments and I'm talking to you, it didn't really make much sense for me to actually play a video. But there is a QR code. You can find all of them there, and Michael has shared that for you also in the chat. All right. So basically, these reviews are looking at how effective these drugs, these biologics in our case, how clinically effective they are, how well do they work compared to another similar option. So that's a really important part here. It's a comparison. You got to have something that you're comparing it to. And through this process, then there are price recommendations or fair pricing that are recommended based on the value that is established. And so in saying that, value again, bringing back our starting here conversation, value to you, improved health, living longer, no comorbidities. That's also value what they're looking for in these assessments. And they do this largely through research and data, but they look to see how valuable is this? How well is this treatment working? And that's when the assessment comes in. So they assess it. They look at all the information, which we'll learn a little bit more here as we keep talking. So the more information, the better to assess the value. Patient voice comes in. All right, so health technology assessment, or HTA, is the more common phrase, but I swear the first time I ever heard it, I did not understand. I really thought it meant like cell phones or computers, and I thought, that's strange. So it has nothing to do with that type of technology. So we're really talking about drugs and devices when we're talking about these HTAs. And as mentioned, it's about reviewing, in our case, mostly biologics that are approved by the Food and Drug Administration or the European Medicines Agency after a clinical trial, which I know Kat's going to go into as well, and before they go to market, which means before you have access to them at the doctor's office. So that's kind of when these assessments happen, which is sort of important to understand, especially if you are a person maybe who has failed several biologics. You may be looking for these to come out, and so the timing might matter to you. And then again, to establish what is considered a fair price. There are different ways. So I wanted to just mention this. This is not a US specific thing. Okay, so health technology assessments have been going on for a long, long time, and different healthcare systems around the world utilize them, and there are different opinions about them, different processes. ICER is the group that predominantly does most of these values assessments in the United States, but we're not going to explain the actual methods today. It involves math and all kinds. This is math class today, so maybe when we combine math class, we'll have a 201 or a 301. But we're just going to talk about the basics first, and then if hopefully you're interested in this topic, come back to the other courses. We'll have a math teacher maybe in and guest speaker, and we'll talk a little bit about all of the ways that we do these value assessments. All right, and why should you care? So obviously, if something is valuable, you want to be able to access it, right? And so this isn't the step therapy one, the step therapy class, but we did have one. So I like to be able to sort of tie back to some of the classes we had. And this does, I mean, once you get your access to your, or once you know that there's a drug that might work best for you, you want access to it, right? So once it gets on market, you want to be able to have it on your formulary or on the drug list or on the preferred list that your insurance company or your government, depending on who creates that drug list that says this is the one you have to try first because this is the most affordable to us. Now, I want to preface this, and I know Kat's going to mention it too. ICER is not responsible for what happens after they put their report out. Okay, so that is important to understand. But the reports may also are often looked at by these groups in determining what they might put on their formulary. So that's why, again, it's important for us to start getting involved more in this, because there are sections, which Kat's going to talk all about, that we could be part of to help influence, to help these insurance companies and these governments see that what we as patients also find valuable. So we have the leverage as patients to really start to help shift the access part of this. So it's kind of an exciting time for patients, I want to say. There's basically a couple outcomes that are going to happen, and be like, okay, we did the review, now what? So sometimes it's going to conclude that the price may be all right. So that's that middle bullet. Okay, all good. If you've exhausted all of your medications, you have comorbidities, and you need to access it, you were probably less likely to have access issues, except you might hit the step therapy. So that's why that is up there. So again, don't want you to think just because a report comes out and says this is not going to, necessarily be priced, it might be too high, and insurance companies may be looking at that, it's still up to them to decide what's on their formulary. So whether it comes out to be priced right or priced too high, that's where it stops as far as these value assessments. Okay. And so if the drug might be priced too high or its estimated fair price, then, the insurance company just might put it farther away from access. It might just be because it's too expensive, because there's a lot of stuff that goes on after these reports where they negotiate on the prices and then they create these formularies. So just want to make it really clear that part happens after these assessments are over. And we are really going to focus in on ways we can get more involved to make sure the subgroups are counted, to make sure that more voices are part of this so that we can get more data, more information that will count towards showing value from what patients find valuable. So Kat is going to talk about some of the ways that ICER is working towards including more patients in these, and then we'll talk more about everything afterwards. So I am going to turn it over to ICER, and I would turn it over to Kat at ICER, and I did circle the United States just to again clarify, these are not just United States. This is, ICER is predominantly doing these things in the United States. There are other groups around the world who are doing these. So this is just one organization who is going to present today. So again, please ask any questions that you have in the chat. And just as a reminder, this class is for patients and care partners. And so others are welcome to observe the class, but please do not join the chat unless you are a person living with these conditions. All right. So Kat, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Perfect. All right. Let me get my slides up here. So thank you, Tiffany, for that intro. Is that showing up okay for you guys?
Yep.
Perfect.
All right. I'm going on mute.
Okay. Great. Well, Tiffany did a great job of providing some background context, because when I was invited to give an HTA 101, I was like, I'm going to need an hour. Like, there's no way that we're going to get through all this information. So there's a lot of helpful context there. So today with you, I want to provide an intro to ICER, to HTA, and our patient engagement process. So ICER, so again, the Institute for Clinical and Economic Review. I like to describe this organization in some of these distinct ways. One, we are an independent organization, and that's really important to keep in mind. So we're not working for the US government. We're not working for the pharmaceutical industry. We're not working for health plans. We're a completely independent organization, and we're a nonprofit. And so we're a 501c3 organization, and we are primarily a research institute. And the type of research that ICER is conducting is called health technology assessment, or HTA. So I want to spend just a little bit of time talking about health technology assessment. So Tiffany did a good job of kind of previewing some of these words. But when we're talking about a technology that we're assessing, that technology can be a drug, it can be a medical device, it could be a surgical procedure. Really, it could be any sort of health intervention that you are curious about evaluating. And so when we're assessing a health technology, that assessment, as Tiffany mentioned, by definition is comparative in nature. So you are always going to be comparing one health intervention to another health intervention in order to determine the added value of that new intervention for the patient population and to society. And so what I find really interesting about health technology assessment is that it is a research process that allows you to look not just at the medical or the clinical dimensions and the economic dimensions of value, but it also incorporates the social and the ethical implications of having a new treatment or a new intervention that's available to a health system. And the entire purpose of health technology assessment is to be able to inform decision making in healthcare. So as Tiffany mentioned, HTAs exist all over the world. Kind of how they're organized within different countries looks really different. And so I'll be speaking about how ICER is organized within the US, but just know that in a lot of countries, they do sit within government and they have kind of different responsibilities and roles in terms of how they are informing decisions for healthcare. So setting a little bit of context for HTA, which I think is really important to explain the why of why do we conduct health technology assessment and why does ICER exist within the US? So importantly, as you can imagine, we live in a world with limited money, limited resources, really limited everything, because we have kind of a finite availability for anything within a system. And so you can imagine that within the health system, when you have a limited budget and limited resources, any time that you make a decision, there are necessary trade-offs that are happening. And so what I mean by that is when we look maybe within a health system, if we have X amount of money, if we choose to spend a lot of that money for one disease area, let's say we spend a lot of that money for cancer, then we have less money to spend for other disease areas. And so decision makers every day are grappling with how do we allocate resources and budget in order to kind of channel it towards the biggest needs within the health system. And so even outside of the health system, kind of HTA doesn't just inform health, but it's kind of informing all the decisions within kind of an ecosystem. And so if we as a country or we as a society are spending more money on healthcare, then we have less money to spend on infrastructure or education or other priorities within society. And so that's what I really mean by trade-offs. And so it's really neat that we have health technology assessment as a way to help inform decisions about how do we think about these really hard questions about, where do we spend our money and why? And it's really meant to support population level decisions. And so that's really important. And if you take one thing away from the entire class today, I want it to be that health technology assessment is here to inform population level decisions. So of course we know that patients have very individual experiences, but as a health system, we are asked to make decisions on a population level. And so here specifically, the context in the US is that we, for the most part, have uncontrolled drug pricing. That's starting to be a little different now with the negotiations with the IRA, but in general, the pharmaceutical industry is allowed to choose whatever price they want for a new drug that's entering the market. And that's not really the case in a lot of other countries. When they do health technology assessment, there is, a set price that they have to come out with that drug or they can't launch it. And so that's very distinct here in the US. And because of the uncontrolled pricing, what we find is that the response then from insurance plans is that they have to put up restrictions if the drug is coming in too high. In order to be able to serve all of their members, they have to put up restrictions to access. And so too often, as many of you on this call know, it's the patients that are caught in the middle of that. And so that's why ICER exists. And so going on to our next slide here, the goals of HTA are really to be able to inform decisions that lead to both safe and effective health interventions, and to make sure that when these new interventions are entering the market, that the price of those interventions actually match the benefits that patients receive. In other words, this idea of value-based pricing. The price of new interventions should match the value that patients and families are actually receiving. So if an intervention is providing a lot of value, we think that intervention should cost more versus an intervention that's producing less value for patients. So, to really drive that point home, it's not that we're here to say that we're advocating for low pricing. That's not it. We're advocating for fair pricing, in that there is kind of this range within which things that work better for patients, we believe, should be valued more. And so ICER's goal here in the US is to inform decisions around drug pricing and patient access. And so those are kind of the two big decision points that we're trying to inform here, given the context of the healthcare system in the US with unregulated drug pricing. So something that's unique about ICER is that within the US healthcare system, we know that it's when a new drug is approved by the FDA, at that moment, the maker of that drug, the manufacturer, chooses the price for that drug, and then insurance plans respond by trying to figure out how they want to cover this new drug on their formularies for their patients. And so that's why it's really important to ICER to push out our research report around the same time that the FDA is going to make this decision about whether or not this drug is going to be approved. And so that's a fun process for our pharmaceutical intelligence team to try to guess when this drug is going to get through the FDA's pipeline, so that ICER can start our review about 8 to 9 months in advance, so that our report will be ready to help inform the people that are making these decisions about pricing and access. So Tiffany talked a little bit about, how we think about value. And so what I also wanted to share today is how ICER thinks about value. So we have our value assessment framework, otherwise affectionately known as our VAF. And the VAF is kind of this guiding star for how ICER approaches our methods, our process, our stakeholder engagement for every drug review. And so when ICER thinks about value, we think about it in these 4 main buckets. And so it also really aligns really well with the initial definition of HTA, and kind of looking at 4 different dimensions of value. And so we have, of course, the clinical benefits, so the health benefits. And so Tiffany mentioned a few of, does this new intervention improve your quality of life? Does it help you live longer? Does it reduce side effects? What are the health benefits of this new intervention? And then there's the economic profile there. So what are the costs of the treatment? Are there any costs related to administration or having to deal with adverse events? Are there any cost savings because this new treatment works so well that you don't have to take other treatments anymore? Are there costs to the caregiver? Are there productivity costs because you're not able to go into work? And so we kind of take all of the costs and all of the cost savings and come up with a total cost to reflect the economic value of this new intervention. And then at ICER, we recognize that there are a lot of things that are important to the patient community that are just not measured, but that doesn't mean that it's not important. And so we consider these benefits beyond health. And so those represent things that maybe weren't measured in the clinical trials. There's no data or evidence to support them. But in speaking with the patient community, we recognize that these are really important priorities. And so this is an opportunity for ICER to highlight that in the value assessment of this new intervention. And so those could include things like, does this new treatment help reduce health inequities? Is there kind of a new mechanism of action that's kind of maybe reducing the complexity of taking this medication? Maybe it's an oral drug, and previously you've always had to take some sort of infusion. And so those kinds of things we know are valuable to patients, but there's no good way to measure them. And so we reflect that within the ICER report. And then finally, as you know, health technology assessment also encompasses the social and ethical priorities to the community. And so maybe there's some really important social issues that the new drug kind of creates, any legal issues, especially as we think about this new wave of gene therapies. Are there kind of any ethical questions that it raises? And so that's ICER's opportunity to also reflect those impacts within the entire value assessment. And so that's a very high level overview of how we think about value. Our VAF document really goes in depth about how we go about determining these aspects of value, what kind of data sources we use, what kind of engagement we do in order to get here. And so I've linked that here in the slides if you are interested in learning more about that. But with that, I'm going to stop sharing my slide, and I'm excited to go into the discussion portion before I talk more about how you as a patient community can be engaged with ICER.
All right. Okay, so I will go back to my screen here. Can you all see mine? Be back. Kat, Michael, can you see my screen? Okay. All right. Thank you. All right. So next, we are going to go into what we call class discussion. And so you are all invited. Again, if you are a person affected by our diseases, a patient, a care partner, if you are observing, we respectfully request that you do not participate in the chat. And again, do not feel embarrassed. This was if you have questions about how this works, about what a value assessment is, anything that you've seen so far that resonated with you, that you might want to ask a question, we welcome you to do that. And we'll be watching the chat to see. But in the meantime, Michael and I will just stop sharing screen because we just want to have a conversation here. And this is not the lecture portion of the class. This is when we literally just break out and have genuine conversations. And so in saying that, I'm going to have Michael first. Michael, any thoughts, questions? I mean, you don't even have to be questions. If you just had any general thoughts too, I'd like you to just weigh in because you haven't been able to speak yet on anything that you saw so far.
Well, the first thing I have to note is that Deanne had something funny to say in the comments. She's like, the accountant in me is often at war with the patient in me. And this is it's like a micro universe of what ICER does, though. It's like this is the what we have to do as patients and what we have to weigh. Is this medication going to help me versus can I go to work, things like that. And we were talking about it the other day, and we were talking about our diseases with inflammatory diseases. And I was talking about the fact that before I started on biologics, I had trouble sitting and standing, and just because my hip, which is for all intents and purposes, it's your butt. My butt would hurt, and I got my bottom, my tushy. So it would hurt though, but it's a lot of pain that's very uncomfortable. But when you work and you have to sit all day, that's going to affect you, and then you can't go to work. And I make light of it, but I make light of it in a way where the biologics were able to get me back into a position where I can make money and I can earn a living. So these are the micro decisions we have to make, as opposed to everything that you all and I should do. Now, I do have a question though. I hope I do not go into the weeds too far here. You had those 4 categories. Is there a value assessed? Because Tiffany was talking about a math problem. Is there like a numerical value assessed to each one of those, or it's just it seems impossible because you're talking about things that are abstract? But how does that go?
Right. No, that's a great question, Michael. So I would say in terms of the numerical, that really sits within the clinical and the economic section, because those are generally where we have data to kind of inform those analyses. And so in terms of the clinical, we're doing a systematic literature review and trying to identify, do the data support that one, like the new intervention is better or worse than the one that we're comparing it to. And so that's, a form of analysis. And then the economic model is very math heavy. I'm not an economist, so I won't go into all the numbers that are in there. But the last 2 buckets of kind of these benefits beyond health and these social and ethical priorities, those are intentionally meant to not be quantitative, right? Because we recognize that we can't boil all of the value of a treatment into numbers. And so those exist to be able to capture all of the unmeasured priorities from the patient community and have a space to kind of elevate that patient voice within the value assessment.
And that's what you're talking about. I'm sorry.
May I just really quickly define a couple of those terms?
Yes, of course.
They're in our glossary.
Yeah.
So systematic literature review, that is a process when you start to collect data for a report, or if you're doing research or anything, you're researching to see what you can find of clinical benefit. So I keep saying systemic because of our diseases. Yeah. A systematic literature review goes and tries to find all of the publications of existing research, of existing data that has happened, and it's all pooled together in this really long list of, and that gives them a basis to start on. So that's what they're looking at, right? So these publications of data. And then when she said quantitative, what that refers to is that it's really hard to include if all of us tell our stories and are explaining to ICER and reporting what's important to us. That is called qualitative research. That means we're talking, we're having open-ended conversations. That's data. It can be analyzed, but it's not your clinical trial measured data points that happen in a clinical trial that are being measured by your blood work and all of these things that happen in a clinical trial, right? So it's different kind of research. So I just wanted to clarify those couple of terms because that's going to become important as we talk about how to get involved. Sorry.
No, thank you, Tiffany. You should come to all my meetings because that is so helpful to have an immediate glossary there.
And then the other question I was going to ask was, since you started including the patients more into these decisions, has there been any examples of something that the patients have been able to bring to the table and to factor into the whole evaluation? I don't know how to put it.
I think that's exactly. I understand exactly what you're asking. How have us being part of it influenced, if at all, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we have so many examples. I will note that ICER, like in the last few years, has had a formal patient engagement program, and now that I'm overseeing it, I have examples from every single review, which was not necessarily, there wasn't one point person for all of them, and so it's been really neat for me to observe across the board how patient engagement is impacting the conclusions of an ICER report, and so. I think one of the earliest examples I can share is our review of therapies for a condition called lupus nephritis. And just engaging with that community along the way, we learned that there was things that we couldn't gather from the clinical trial data, which were that patients with lupus nephritis really had a lot of concerns about their fertility and questions that some of these therapies might be impacting their ability to get pregnant. And so that is a patient insight that we were then able to include not only in a chapter of ICER's report, but bring to the public deliberation part of our process and kind of elevate that part of the patient community's experience of this doesn't exist within the data or the evidence right now, but we understand that this is important to the community. So how can we as a deliberative body kind of include that as we think about what is fair pricing and fair access, right? And so that's really going to be pulled through the access piece, really, of how is the manufacturer and how is insurance plans thinking about how these treatments might impact the future fertility of these patients. So that's one example from lupus. Let me see. I think a more recent impact from the sickle cell disease community that is a little bit more quantitative. So as Tiffany just defined that, in speaking with the sickle cell community, we had gathered at ICER a certain number as the average number of pain crises, which is kind of an outcome that sickle cell patients are having and presenting with at the hospital. And that's what clinical trials were measuring. And So we had a number from the clinical trials, but the more and more that we spoke with patients from the community, we understood that those trials being in this like research setting weren't maybe accurately like fully capturing how many pain crises were actually happening in the community, because not all patients would go to a hospital. They were kind of self-medicating at home. And so we learned that maybe the numbers in the trials were actually underestimating the true number of pain crises that sickle cell patients were having. And so in those conversations, we were kind of pointed to a different evidence source that also more aligned with what the community was telling us. And so we increased that number in the economic model to reflect a more accurate number that the community believed to be true. And so that's a great example about how patient engagement changed the quantitative number that was informing ICER's economic model.
Since, I mean, well, in our community, in like the autoimmune and inflammatory, we're kind of used to pain, a lot of us. We have a base level of pain all the time. Has there been measures to work on the underreporting of pain and that kind of, like, I know there's plenty of, I know we're not alone, but since this is kind of what we do, I'm going to ask but is there any other examples that you have been able to combat the underreporting or just
of pain? Or do you mean of pain specifically, or just other outcomes?
Pain, or just other, pain or outcomes that you just don't think of. Because for example, like a young person, if you're 2 or 3 years old and you have pain in your ankle, you don't know to tell your parents that you have the pain because it's always been there.
Right.
So I say pain, but like any symptom,
right?
Whether it be dry eyes or.
Before you answer, Kat, I just want to make sure too that I clarify with you, Kat, where I think this might go, and you tell me if I'm right, or because I'm kind of testing myself too, if I understand this process as well. So when Michael's talking about pain in this situation, and let's say any of our diseases and the drugs are under review. Now, as a person who is a patient research partner, and if you're out there listening, you too can be a patient research partner. There's my little ad. So because AiArthritis does a lot of projects with research people, and in a lot of our projects, we help determine what domains are studied or what symptoms like pain are studied in the clinical trials. So often, and correct me if I'm wrong, Kat, but so Michael, if the pain domain was in the clinical trial as a quality of life, something very important to tackle, that would be captured in the data because that was in the clinical trial. And usually pain, fatigue are ones that are measured in clinical trials. Did I get that right, Kat?
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And because I think just in the nature of our reviews being so early, right? So like ICER is conducting these reviews before there's even FDA approval. There's not a ton of evidence of data other than the clinical trial data. And so 99% of the data that end up feeding into an ICER report are from clinical trials. And so it's whatever those trials are measuring. And so that would just be like my plug here to say, if the clinical trials aren't measuring the outcomes that are most important and meaningful to patients, that is an opportunity for the manufacturer to be working with the community and for the community to be advocating to the manufacturers to include those outcomes in the clinical trial data so that when it gets to a point where it's ready for value assessment, those data are available to be incorporated into the value. Otherwise, it's really missing, right? Like to Michael's point, it's like it's underreporting or it's underestimating the value. And that really belongs in the design of how those clinical trials are measuring what's most important to patients in the first place.
And Michael, I know you and I have had conversations before where you were concerned about people with different demographic backgrounds, people of color, and not often represented in clinical trials, if that's the data used as well.
Yeah, and that's a problem with the, I mean, not a problem, I shouldn't say it like that. That's an issue that does come up with the clinical trials itself, because now you're trying to serve a community that may not want to be part of a test, and which is completely understandable. I understand if no one wants to become part of a test, I mean, that's kind of productive because we need those people to take the tests, especially for things that are almost proven, especially if you're having those issues. So yeah, we've talked about that in the past, and also I hate to encourage people to do trials because it's not our job, but if there's an opportunity, I mean, you are helping because now do you take once ICER reviews a drug, after it comes out, do you do like a 5 years later, do you review it again? Because you've only talked about just as the FDA approval comes, is there another opportunity for you to look at more information?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll say the reason, again, right, that we review it as the FDA is approving it is because ICER wants to have impact on the launch price of those drugs. And so we think the highest impact is kind of informing what a fair price for that drug is as soon as it launches. Because if it's already on the market and it's at a really high price, like we're going to have less impact in trying to kind of speak into what the actual value is. And so that's why we have that timing. To your point, there are always additional data that come out after the fact. And so we do have a 12-month checkup. And so 12 months after the final report is posted, we'll reach out to all of the engaged stakeholders, including the manufacturer and the patient community, to say, are there additional data that have come out that you think could impact the results from the ICER report? And so then we could at least acknowledge that we could at least go back in time and note that the original version of the report is no longer up to date, right? Which would be really important. And then if there's considerable data to change the conclusions of an ICER report, I think on a case-by-case basis, we're able to go in and kind of update the conclusions from that assessment.
That was an excellent question, Michael.
So often.
Excellent question. I'm looking in the chat. I don't see any specific questions. A lot of this is interesting and things like that. So I agree. It is interesting. I know that we do want to talk about ways with ICER and with AiArthritis that people can get more involved in this, and we'll still encourage, if you have more questions, you can add them. You can also submit them after the fact. If you're like, I need to wrap my brain around this one, that's okay. I get it. And we can talk about it after. I know Cat would probably, I think Cat would be
Please do.
Happy. Okay.
I would. I was going to volunteer. Well, one thing I would add is just that I didn't know anything about ICER or health technology assessment until I started working here. And so please don't think that I'm an expert by any means. I just have worked here longer than you have. But as the director of patient engagement, one of the funnest parts of my job is getting to have conversations with people from the patient community and just explain what it is that we do and why it's impactful, and why it's helpful for us to have the patient community engage, as well as what is the value add for you? Why is that a good use of your time? And so please know that if you have any questions at all, I am the most happy to jump on a call with you and just chat.
Well, we appreciate that. Okay, so before we're gonna, in a second here, we're gonna have Kat share her screen again to start talking about ways that they can get involved. So, and we are going to talk more about how AiArthritis can help if you want to start getting more involved in health technology assessments. And I just want to, excuse me, mention too that I think a lot of the reasons why patients, if they're not necessarily informed about how these work, it can be really scary because most of us have been on this treatment path where we've had our treatment taken away from us. So that thought like, oh my gosh, what if something new, comes out and I can't access it? And so that is a real fear. And I want to acknowledge that. And I think, Kat, everybody acknowledges that, but there is a process, and we just have to really just look at what we can do to all work together and make sure that patients have access to treatments that are that also fit into our healthcare system, because there is the insurance companies and the governments do have an ethical responsibility to divvy up that piece of the pie, and it is challenging. And so I can't say it enough, more voices who talk, the more data we have, the more we can influence this. So, Kat, tell us how we can get more involved.
Absolutely. All right. There we go. All right. Our patient engagement process at ICER, my baby. It's about an 8-month process. And so that's just how an ICER review works, given the review team needing to kind of draft and develop this entire evidence report. And so I like to describe it in 4 distinct phases. Phase 1 is when ICER invites the patient community to share their lived experience with us. Phase 2 then is opportunities for the community to respond to our work. Tell us what we got right, tell us what we got wrong, how we can make our research outline and our research report more accurate and reflective of the true patient experience. And then phase 3, once we've kind of landed on an evidence report, is to invite the patient community to then come in and participate at our public meeting. And the public meeting is a place where ICER presents on the report, and we all have, like, all stakeholders come and we have a discussion about, okay, what are next steps here? How should decision makers be thinking about this new treatment, how to price it, how to cover it, based on the evidence that we have put together within this report. And then phase 4 really happens after the ICER process, which is we hope that the report has empowered your community with evidence, with tools and resources to continue advocating for your disease. And so don't be alarmed by the amount of text on the next slide, but I just wanted to point out that we have tons of opportunities to engage with the patient community. And so for each of these phases, there are multiple ways that you can choose to engage. And of course, these are all optional, right? And so this is really a pick and choose based on what you have a capacity to do as an organization or as an individual and what you're most passionate to speak into. So within the share phase of our process, you could just submit the share your story form, which is answering 5 quick questions about your lived experience. Or you can jump on a call with our research team to share directly on Zoom with them about the impacts of the condition, impacts on your caregiver. We also have patient and caregiver group interviews, if that's a better fit for you. And then in terms of responding to our work, you can respond by emailing me, emailing the program manager with your thoughts, or you can write up kind of more formal public comment letter that ICER then publishes on our website of this is what we heard from the general public on what we did right and what we did wrong and how we can be better. And then in terms of participating at the meeting, you can just be an attendee on this day-long webinar, or you can serve as an expert panelist throughout the day, kind of serving as a resource for the committee as they're thinking about ICER's evidence and what to make of it. Or you can just give a 5-minute oral comment at our meeting. And then finally, I just want to kind of drive home that the ICER report provides a new way for you to share your patient perspectives on a treatment with those that are making decisions about the pricing and the access of that treatment. So again, feel free to let me know if you have any questions on this. I just wanted to give you a taste of all the different ways that you can participate over the 8 to 9 month process. But importantly, I wanted to kind of end here with how can ICER reports benefit the patient community? And so one important way, as I mentioned, is that these reports really allow insurance providers to hear directly from you. So if you already don't have a mechanism to get your patient experience kind of communicated to those that are making decisions about access and coverage, the patient perspectives chapter of ICER's report, we've heard from insurance plan community and from the patient community, is a really good way to summarize kind of comprehensively what is the patient experience and what are the patient priorities. What should we be signaling as kind of future research needs in this area? All of that is summarized so that those that are making decisions can review the ICER report and not just see the clinical results or the economic results, but they can also see these things that were not measurable that they can recognize as really important to consider in the overall value of a new treatment. And how to kind of factor that in as you're making decisions for an entire population in the health system. So with that, I'm going to close there. I hope that was a really helpful teaser for everyone on this call. Happy to answer any questions at all. If you can't think of anything today, but you think of something, you're sleeping on it, and you think of something, don't hesitate to reach out to me. I've included some of my information here and some quick links to the ICER webpage, to our patient portal, and to our weekly newsletter as well. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Kat. So a couple, I'll go back in and okay, share my screen here. So we stopped with the class discussion here. But before I jump into this slide, I want to just address a couple of things too, just to fill in the blanks here. So thank you again, Kat, for mentioning those things. There had some of the things to just keep in mind is, I mean, ICER doesn't do reviews on every single drug and every single disease, right? So just because you're listening to this doesn't necessarily mean that there will be a review for you to participate in. So, but that doesn't mean that your stories don't matter, and it doesn't mean that we shouldn't be proactive and continue to collect stories, do research, be involved in the kind of data that could come up in the future. So that's important just to note there. Also, you know, one of the things that is challenging, as we all know, is that insurance companies or governments, they look at the price. That's what they're negotiating for, and it is a population-based level. And what that means, I should probably stop sharing my screen and actually talk to you so you can see my face. Okay. And what that, you know, what that means is that does conflict a lot with our diseases, right? They're heterogeneous. We none of us kind of respond the same. Your RA isn't your RA, isn't your RA. And that does create conflict here when we're talking about these assessments. And I'm a big believer, and AiArthritis is a big believer in trying to do your best to always meet in the middle. So there, you'll find there's some on all different sides that are like, have very strong opinions on what will work and what doesn't work. But these are real. These are happening. And while there may be some concern about the population level, the good news is that a lot of these are starting to consider subgroups in their evolution of their processes, because precision medicine is moving forward, and that's a good thing. And so I do encourage people to, yes, have concerns over processes. Well, AiArthritis writes letters to ICER, and we've said exactly where we think that there could be improvements. And we're also here to say we see where we could possibly help. And so that's kind of the position that we have here. And I wanted to just make that really clear. In saying that, we at AiArthritis really want to take advantage of the things that ICER and other HTA groups around the world, we're international, are offering, so that we can get more involved. And maybe the more we get involved, the more solutions we as patients, as people with liver diseases, can start getting like these aha moments, and then help to further evolve the process. And so in saying that, there are links to forms. We'll make sure that you all get links to those types of things. But there are public comments. There are things that we can submit that every so often ICER will put out, and AiArthritis does invite you to join us for private webinars, private conversations where you can learn about how to submit them with us. We've done it already before. And so don't feel like, gosh, I want to kind of participate, but I don't know how. We will help you. We will help you do that. So in saying that, as we're starting to close out here, your stories matter. So nothing can replace lived experience. You know, people make access decisions for us. And so those people need to understand what we need and why we need it. Mention the general patient population, which is it's a hard one for us, especially when none of us really are textbook, even when we're initially diagnosed. There's a very small percentage, but that's also problematic in the clinical trials, which are improving, because they also recruit the general patient population. So it's kind of a bigger bubble, that if we want to start saying how we as people with individualized or subgroups matter, then we are going to encourage you to really get involved in subgroup research and stories. And you can do that because we have a new AiArthritis research database. That's right, we do. And it is focusing all on precision medicine, subgroups, what you respond to on your treatments. And when Kat said that ICER has their 12-month checkup, well, guess what we're going to be doing in our data bank if one of our disease medications come up. So it is a strictly database that's going to focus on precision medicine, and you can get involved in that immediately. So that is the first step to all of this. In the chat, let us know. Do you think maybe you want to get more involved in the future in value assessments? Has this piqued your interest? The patient voice testimony is always incorporated in the reports, like Kat had said. Of course, these are long reports. We don't know how much the insurance companies or governments are looking at that, but maybe we can do something to put it in front of their faces. So that's always an option. Hundreds, even thousands of us all participating means data, and it's hard to ignore us when there is strength in numbers. So get involved in research. That again can be you, the little yellow donut up there. Last, can't have a class without a quiz. So let us know. Do you feel like you could tell someone else a little bit about value assessment? Just a couple things, like maybe one or two facts. I think that will pass you with an A. Do you feel like you can provide one example of why patient voice is getting involved in the value assessment process is important? If you can say that statement, well done. You get an A for today in our pop quiz. And action plan, just because this webinar and this class ends today, don't forget this is a much bigger project that we have. So in addition to these classes, we have field trips. What? So much fun. So make sure that you're registered for our class, and we'll let you know when we go on conferences. If we go to ICER, if we're in Boston and we stop by, we'll bring you with us. So you can always have these elevated experiences as well, where you can go past these classrooms and really go behind the scenes with us, and we will help you to improve your own healthcare journey. Thank you from AiArthritis. Thank you, Kat, for coming. This was amazing. So
thanks for having me. This was so fun.
And thank you, Michael, for being our discussion leader today. And just shout out all of our project committee, our patient committee leaders who are volunteers with our organization, who have helped to create this whole entire classroom, because we always invite our volunteers at AiArthritis to get as involved as they would like. And I always say, whether it's the CEO or the newest volunteer, you matter. So if you're interested in volunteering with our organization with this project or any of us, you could always email Michael at aiarthritis.org, or when we follow up, we'll also make sure that you have the direct link to the volunteer program and to make sure that you're officially signed up for this. All right, I think that is a wrap. The bell is ringing and class is dismissed. So all of you have a wonderful, wonderful day, and we thank you for joining class today.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Thanks, Tiffany. Thanks, Michael.
Bye-bye.